Have you ever met someone who seemed amazing at first? Charming, magnetic, larger than life, only to leave you feeling drained, confused, or even broken? Chances are you've crossed paths with a narcissist. And here's the kicker, they don't come with a warning label. But what if you could spot them before they wreck you? Today, we're diving into the mind of a narcissist through the genius of Carl Jung. Yes, the psychology legend. And I'm giving you 5 crystal clear signs to watch for. Stick around, because this could save your sanity, or even your life. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, didn't just study the mind, he cracked it open. He believed we all carry a shadow, the hidden, messy parts of ourselves we don't want to face. Narcissists? They've turned that shadow into a weapon. So, let's use Jung's wisdom to unmask them. Ready? Here we go. Sign number 1, the persona that's too perfect. Let's dive into the first glaring sign of a narcissist. Their persona is too perfect. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychology titan, gave us this gem of a concept, the persona. It's the mask we all wear to impress the world, like the version of you that's charming at a party or nails a presentation. It's your public face, and we've all got one. But narcissists don't just wear a mask. They've constructed an entire Broadway production around it, complete with dazzling lights, a roaring crowd, and a script where they're the unbeatable star. They're that person who's always the hero in their own epic tale, flawless, successful, untouchable, and oh so above the rest of us mere mortals. You've met them, the friend who's got a story for every occasion, and somehow they're always the shining savior. Ever run into someone who brags nonstop or feels too good to be true, like they've stepped out of a Hollywood blockbuster? That's the narcissist's persona kicked into overdrive, and it's a neon sign screaming trouble ahead. Jung would tell you they're hiding a fragile ego behind this glittering facade, and if you squint, you'll see the cracks. Here's the thing. Jung saw the persona as a tool, a way to fit into society without losing yourself. It's supposed to be flexible, adaptable, but narcissists have turned it into a steel cage. Their mask isn't just polished, it's impenetrable. They've got this aura of perfection that's so intense it's almost blinding. Think about that colleague who name-drops their genius ideas every 5 minutes, or the date who can't stop talking about how everyone admires them. It's not confidence, it's a performance. And the wild part? They need you to buy the ticket to their show. Without your applause, the whole act starts to wobble. Picture this. Oh, I single-handedly saved the project at work. Nobody else could have done it. Did I mention I'm basically irreplaceable? Sound familiar? That's your red flag waving like a flare in the night. I once knew a guy who swore he turned around a failing company in a week. Spoiler alert, he didn't. The real story? He showed up late, took credit for the team's grind, and basked in the praise like he'd invented success itself. Everyone else saw through it, but in his head, he was the CEO of the universe. Jung had a theory about this. He said the persona covers up what's underneath. An ego that's brittle as glass. For narcissists, that ego's so shaky they can't risk anyone peeking behind the curtain. They're dodging the messy human parts of themselves, what Jung called the shadow, and overcompensating with this larger-than-life act. He'd argue they've lost connection to their true self, the deeper, authentic core we all have. Instead, they lean hard into the hype, piling on the charm and the boasts until it's all you see. But those cracks Jung hinted at are real. Catch them off guard, skip the praise or question their story, and watch the mask slip. Their smile might twitch, or they'll snap like you've insulted their whole existence. That's the fragility leaking out. So why should you care? Because this overblown persona isn't just annoying, it's bait. Narcissists use it to hook you, pull you into their orbit, and before you know it, you're tangled in their chaos. Spot it early, and you've got a shield. Next time someone's dazzling you with nonstop self-praise or a vibe that's too perfect to trust, step back. Ask, is this real, or is it a show? That's your first warning they might wreck you if you don't wise up fast. Sign number 2. They feed on your energy, the vampire complex. Now let's get into sign number 2. Narcissists feed on your energy. It's what I call the vampire complex. Carl Jung, the genius who mapped the human psyche, believed in complexes, these hidden emotional triggers buried deep in our minds, like landmines waiting to go off. They shape how we act, how we feel, sometimes without us even knowing. For most of us, complexes are just part of being human, but narcissists have a twisted version, a vampire complex, that turns them into emotional leeches. They don't just want your attention, they need to suck your energy dry to feel alive. Ever walked away from a conversation with someone feeling like you've been hit by a truck while they're practically glowing, buzzing with life? That's not random, it's their game plan. They'll charm you, pull you in, demand every ounce of your focus, and if you don't play along, watch out, they'll flip faster than a light switch. Jung might say they're projecting their own inner emptiness onto you, and guess what? You're the one left footing the bill. Let's break this down. Jung saw complexes as these bundles of emotion tied to our unconscious, stuff we've buried or ignored. A healthy person might wrestle with them, grow from them. Narcissists don't. Instead, they've got this insatiable hunger, a void they can't fill on their own. So they turn to you. Picture that friend who dominates every chat. Every story's about them. Every laugh has to be at their joke. At first it's fun, they're magnetic, captivating. But 10 minutes in, you're wiped out, and they're still going strong. Why? Because they're not connecting with you. They're consuming you. It's like they've got fangs sunk into your soul, draining your spark to fuel their own. I've seen it firsthand. I had a coworker once, let's call her Lisa. She'd breeze into the room all smiles and charisma, and everyone would perk up. She'd launch into these wild tales about her weekend, her brilliance, her everything. You'd nod, laugh, give her the stage. But the second you tried to shift the focus, say, mention your own day, she'd glaze over, interrupt, or straight up sulk. If you didn't feed her the attention she craved, she'd get cold, snappy, even spiteful. One time, I was too busy to play along, and she stormed off, telling everyone I was jealous. Meanwhile, I was just exhausted. That's the vampire complex in action. They thrive when you're depleted. Jung would have a field day with this. He'd say narcissists are so disconnected from their own depths, their true self, as he called it, that they can't generate their own vitality. They've got this hollow spot where self-worth should be, and instead of facing it, they latch onto you. It's projection, pure and simple. Their emptiness becomes your burden. Ever notice how they light up when you're praising them, but the minute you pull back, they turn dark? That's them scrambling for their next fix. And if you dare set a boundary, say, hey, I need a break, they'll guilt you, rage, or play the victim. It's all about keeping the supply flowing. Here's why this hits hard. It's sneaky. You don't realize you're being drained until you're already flat. So next time you're with someone who leaves you feeling like a shell while they're bouncing off the walls, clock it. Ask yourself, am I their battery pack? If the answer's yes, you're dealing with a narcissist, and they'll keep feeding until you're empty. Protect your energy, because they won't. Sign number 3, the shadow they won't face. Now we're at sign number 3, and this is where Carl Jung gets real juicy. Seriously, buckle up. Jung had this brilliant idea called the shadow. It's the dark underbelly of our psyche, the stuff we repress, like our flaws, our shame, the messy bits we don't want anyone to see. We've all got a shadow. It's what makes us human. Healthy people wrestle with it, face it, even own it over time. But narcissists don't just ignore their shadow, they shove it onto you like it's your baggage to carry. They'll point fingers and criticize you for the exact things they're guilty of, like accusing you of being selfish when they're the ones hogging every spotlight in the room. It's projection 101, straight out of Jung's playbook. He'd call this a flat-out refusal to integrate their shadow, and it's the secret sauce behind why they'll never ever say sorry. Let's unpack this shadow thing. Jung said it's not just random junk. It's the parts of ourselves we've tucked away because they're too raw, too uncomfortable. Maybe it's insecurity, anger, or guilt. For most of us, confronting it is tough, but doable. It's how we grow. Narcissists treat their shadow like a ticking time bomb. Instead of dealing with it, they fling it at you. Ever had someone call you out for something that didn't even make sense, like they're mad at a mirror? That's them dodging their own reflection. I once had a friend who'd rant about how needy everyone was, while she'd blow up my phone with demands for attention. The irony? She couldn't see it. That's the narcissist's trick. They offload their flaws so they never have to face them. Here's a classic move. They'll accuse you of being selfish. Picture this. You're at a party and they're holding court, soaking up every laugh, every compliment. You try to chime in, share a quick story, and suddenly they're glaring, saying, "Wow, you always make it about you." Meanwhile, they've been center stage all night. It's maddening, right? But it's not random. Jung would say they're projecting their own selfishness onto you because admitting it's theirs would crack their perfect image. They can't handle that vulnerability. It's like kryptonite to their ego. I saw this play out big time with an old roommate. He'd leave dishes piled up, trash everywhere, but if I missed one chore, he'd lecture me about responsibility. One day I called him out, calmly, just facts. He flipped, stormed off, and told mutual friends I was impossible to live with. No apology, no reflection, just blame. That's the shadow at work. Jung believed integrating it, owning your junk, builds character. Narcissists refuse, so they stay stuck, slinging mud to keep their hands clean. Why does this matter? Because it's why they'll never say sorry. An apology means facing the shadow, admitting they're flawed, human, messy. That's their nightmare. Jung saw integration as the path to wholeness, but narcissists would rather burn bridges than walk that road. So they double down, gaslight you, twist the story, anything to keep the spotlight off their darkness. Next time they flip your flaw back at you, clock it. It's not about you, it's their shadow screaming to stay hidden. Here's your power move. Don't take the bait. When they project, step back and see it for what it is, a dodge. You're not their dumping ground. Spot this, and you're one step ahead of their chaos. They won't face their shadow, but you don't have to carry it either. Sign number 4. Grandiosity that defies reality. All right, sign number 4 is a doozy. Grandiosity that defies reality. Carl Jung didn't toss around the word narcissist much. But trust me, he'd spot this one in a heartbeat. Narcissists don't just live in the world. They strut through a fantasy where they're the king or queen of absolutely everything. They'll exaggerate achievements until they sound like legends, demand praise like it's oxygen, and act like the rules of life don't even apply to them. They're untouchable, unbeatable, and in their mind, the sun rises and sets on their command. Ever met someone who spins tales so wild you're left blinking, wondering if you missed a chapter? That's their game. I once knew a guy who swore he invented a tech trend. Spoiler alert, he didn't even own a laptop. Jung might say they're overcompensating for an unconscious inferiority complex buried deep in their psyche. You'll just see the arrogance oozing out of every pore. Let's dig into this. Jung was all about the unconscious, the hidden drivers behind what we do. He didn't label it narcissism, but he'd clock this grandiosity as a red flag. These folks build a throne in their head and expect you to bow. Achievements? They'll inflate them like a hot air balloon. I had a cousin who'd brag about closing million-dollar deals. Turns out he was a junior salesman who once answered a client call. Praise? They fish for it constantly. Oh, didn't I tell you how great I am? And if you don't clap, they'll sulk or snap. Rules? Forget it. They'll cut lines, dodge consequences, and act like the world's rigged if they don't get their way. It's not confidence. It's a delusion so big it warps reality. Here's a story for you. This guy I knew, let's call him Mike, told everyone he was a practically famous in his industry. He'd swagger into rooms tossing out lines like, "Yeah, I revolutionized the game. I bought it at first, until I Googled him." Nothing, not a footnote. Turns out he'd pitched one half-baked idea years ago, got laughed out of a meeting, and still acted like he was Steve Jobs reincarnated. People humored him, fed his ego, but the second anyone challenged it, like, "Hey, where's the proof?" he'd turn icy or rant about haters. That's the narcissist's grandiosity, a castle built on quicksand. Jung would have a theory here. He'd say this isn't just bragging, it's a cover-up. Deep down, narcissists wrestle with what he called an inferiority complex, a nagging, unconscious fear they're not enough. Facing that would mean vulnerability, and they'd rather die than show weakness. So they swing the other way, puffing themselves up with hot air until they're floating above the rest of us. Jung might argue it's their ego screaming to drown out the doubt. But here's the catch. Reality doesn't bend. They'll claim they're a genius, but the resume's blank. They'll demand worship, but the room's rolling its eyes. That gap is your clue. Why should you care? Because this grandiosity isn't harmless. It's a trap. They'll drag you into their fantasy, expecting you to play along, prop them up, cheer their every move. Don't? You're the enemy. Spot it early and you can sidestep the drama. Next time someone's boasting louder than life or acting like they're above the rules, test it. Ask for receipts, proof of those big claims. Watch them squirm or lash out. That's the inferiority peeking through, and it's your signal to run. Sign number 5, the emotional ice wall. We've reached the final sign, sign number 5, and it's a chilling one, the emotional ice wall. Carl Jung, the visionary who plumbed the depths of the soul, saw empathy as a bridge between us all, a lifeline connecting one heart to another. It's what lets us feel, support, and lift each other up. Narcissists have burned that bridge to ash. They might fake tears with Oscar-worthy flair or pour on the charm to reel you in. But when you need support, when you're raw, vulnerable, desperate for a shred of care, it's crickets, silence, nada. Their world spins on one axis, them. Jung would argue this isn't just coldness, it's a severed connection to the collective unconscious, that deep well of shared humanity we all tap into. They're cut off, adrift in their own orbit, and trust me, you'll feel the freeze. Let's paint the picture. Jung's collective unconscious is this invisible thread tying us together. Archetypes, instincts, the stuff that makes us human. It's why you tear up at a stranger's pain or cheer for an underdog. Empathy flows from that. Narcissists don't swim in that stream. They've built an ice wall, smooth, towering, impenetrable, around their emotions. Sure, they'll mimic warmth when it suits them. I knew a woman who'd cry on cue, sobbing about her struggles, and I'd rush to comfort her. But the second I needed a shoulder, say, after a brutal week, she'd vanish or pivot back to her own drama. It's a one-way street, and you're left stranded. Here's how it plays out. They're masters at faking it, those crocodile tears or that dazzling smile that hooks you. But flip the script, share your hurt, your fear, and watch what happens. Nothing. Maybe a blank stare, a quick that sucks. Or worse, they'll twist it to spotlight themselves. Oh, you think that's bad? Let me tell you about my day. I once poured my heart out to a guy I thought was a friend. Job stress, family mess, the works. He nodded, then launched into a monologue about his epic weekend. No questions, no care, just a wall of ice where a bridge should have been. That's the narcissist's core. Their feelings matter, yours don't. Jung would dig into this. He'd say the collective unconscious links us to something bigger, a shared soul that fuels compassion. Narcissists have snipped that wire. They're so locked in their own head, their own needs, that they can't or won't reach beyond it. Jung might call it a failure to connect, a stunted psyche that's all me and no way. They don't feel the pull of humanity because they've crowned themselves the only human that counts. And that's why the support never comes. You're knocking on a door that's frozen shut. Why does this sting? Because it's the ultimate betrayal. You give, you trust, you lean in, then bam, you're alone when it matters most. I've felt it. Pouring energy into someone who'd charm me silly, only to vanish when my world cracked. It's not oversight, it's design. Their ice wall isn't a flaw, it's a fortress. So test it next time. Share something real, something that cuts deep. If they dodge, deflect, or go silent, you've hit the wall. That's your proof they're a narcissist. And a sign they'll wreck you if you keep expecting warmth. 5 signs, 5 truths, Jung's laid it bare. You've got the tools now. Spot this ice wall, and you're free to walk away before it traps you. Stay sharp, this one's a game changer. So there you have it. 5 ways to spot a narcissist before they wreck you, straight from Carl Jung's playbook. The persona, the energy drain, the shadow dodge, the grandiosity, and that icy lack of empathy. Spot these, and you're armed to protect yourself. Have you seen these signs in someone? Drop a comment. I read every one. And if this hit home, smash that like button and subscribe. We're decoding the mind every week. Until next time, trust your gut and stay sharp.